This is Score on Business.
Hey, welcome to Score on Business. I'm Pete Hendricks. I'm your host today, an entrepreneur, a SCORE volunteer. Make sure to check out scorenashville.org. There are a lot of resources to help you get started. And our first guest today, Kris Kelso, is an entrepreneur who has founded several companies and has spent a lot of time in healthcare and technology. He currently works as an executive coach, leads a CEO roundtable, and consults with business owners on strategy and leadership development. And thanks for returning, Kris.
Sure, Pete. It's always fun to be here.
Yeah, you're a regular.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so you've served on several boards, and many entrepreneurs wonder if they should have a board of directors. What is the role of a board, and when should an entrepreneur form a board?
Yeah. You know, most of the time when an entrepreneur asks, should I have a board of directors, the answer is almost always no. Mm-hmm. And to understand why, let's talk about the purpose of a board of directors and what their role is. The board of directors their job is to represent the shareholders, the owners of the company, represent the interests of the shareholders to the management team, and to provide oversight and make sure that the management team, the leadership of the company, is operating the company in the best interest of the owners. So for an entrepreneur who owns their company, an owner-operator who may be the CEO and probably owns most of their company, if not all of it, do they need a board of directors? Not really, because all the board would be doing is representing themselves to themselves, if you understand what I mean. However, when most entrepreneurs ask about that, what they're really asking about is, how do I gain a team of advisors? I'm looking for help, I'm looking for guidance, I want to have some experts around me to speak into my business. And there's a lot of other ways to form a board of advisors or a group of advisors without the legal and fiduciary responsibility and sort of the liability that comes with a formal board of directors. There are organizations like the Alternative Board, which we've talked about before.
Yeah, you're involved
that I've been involved with for years, and they put together CEOs and business owners into peer boards where you serve as an advisory council for one another, but you don't have the legal obligation of a board of directors.
And kind of the model with a TAB or another organization, you get together, there's 6 or 7 CEOs in a group. You get together once a month for a half day, and support each other, and then you or another person would meet with them monthly.
It's a facilitated process of getting peer advice in a confidential environment that allows you to get that group of advisors without the formality of a board. Now, where companies do end up forming a board often is when you have multiple owners or stakeholders. And particularly when those stakeholders can't directly influence the company, they're not operators, but they need representation in the company. So a lot of times it happens when an entrepreneur raises money. The investors will insist on having a board that can speak for them. Sometimes the investors want to be on the board, sometimes they want to appoint somebody. But typically for a really small business, a board is not necessary.
So it's really nomenclature, if you will. Smaller companies need a board of advisors. And you wouldn't even have to call it a board.
It doesn't have to be a board. Is a very formal, very specific term that has obligations along with it. And often when there is a board, the entrepreneur themselves may sit on the board and be a board member as well. And in that case, they're wearing multiple hats, sort of working in multiple roles in their business.
Okay. So speaking of multiple roles, many entrepreneurs do a lot of different jobs in their business, especially early on. How should an entrepreneur juggle and prioritize all of those roles?
Yeah, I encourage entrepreneurs to think about wearing lots of different hats, right? Especially when you first start out and you may be the only person in your business, or you may have a very small team. You're working as a salesperson, as a marketing person, as a finance person, as the HR representative, you're the CEO, the COO, you're the customer service rep, and you take the trash out. You do a lot of different things. But what happens is entrepreneurs tend to just jam all of those things together into my job as an entrepreneur, when what they really need to do is think about each distinct role as a separate job that they have to do. And thinking about it this way allows you to do 2 things. Number one, it allows you to compartmentalize and prioritize. If you can think consciously about which job am I doing now, you can be more focused rather than trying to do 10 things at once, which we know and studies show that if if you do too many things at one time, you don't do any of them very well.
Try to do everything, achieve nothing.
Yeah, but the other thing you can do by compartmentalizing, by thinking about consciously taking off one hat and putting on another hat, is you can begin to quantify the time you spend on each role and what that role costs and what the value is, so that you can appropriately figure out when is it time to outsource this function or hire for this function, to offload things from your plate one at a time. And you can gauge your own effectiveness at those things to figure out which ones you should start to hand off first to people that may be better than you. You can assess the cost associated with you doing each of those things and so forth. So think about wearing lots of different hats.
So I really like that concept. That's the first time I think I've heard it on the show. What you're saying is think about each different role separately, track how much time you're spending on that, whether or not you're good with it, and then it helps guide outsourcing.
It helps guide decision making on hiring, outsourcing, partnering, etc.
Right.
Yes.
Are there certain parts of the business that you generally think should be outsourced?
You know, I think it really depends on the person and the business.
Right.
Some people are very quick to want to outsource finance, bookkeeping, the sort of administration of tracking. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, they're either creative types or they're good producers, but they're not good at numbers and sort of the minutia and the details of that. And so it's good for them to offload that to an expert.
Right.
I, on the other hand, in my businesses, many times I've held on to the finance aspect for a long time because I do tend to be a numbers person. And that's how I keep the pulse on the business. But it's not something that I think is a general rule that should be applied to everybody. I think what you have to do is figure out, going back to putting the different hats on, as a business owner, I can look at the CEO, which also happens to be me, and say, you are good at this and not good at that. Therefore, you should do these things and you should not do these things. As the CEO, I can look at the salesperson, who happens to be me, and say, you're not very good at sales, you need to outsource that, but you're really good at watching the numbers, you should keep doing that. And so wearing those different hats not only allows you to recognize the different roles that you do, but allows you to evaluate yourself appropriately in each of those roles and determine when to make a change for your own sake and for the business sake.
Awesome. That's really good input.
Oh, thank you.
So looking back on your entrepreneurial journey, are there any of those roles or jobs you wish you had spent more time on or paid more attention to?
You know, I think the thing that I did not make a conscious effort to learn and study early enough is sales. And it's not that I couldn't sell. I could sit down one-on-one, I could communicate the value of my service and close a deal, and certainly that's required. If you can't sell, you don't have much of a business. But what I didn't do for a long time, and even through multiple businesses and didn't get good at, is studying how to build a disciplined sales process. And I'm talking about understanding understanding your pipeline, understanding what the different decision points are, and how to track and measure the effectiveness of different techniques and tactics and how you approach each aspect of the sales process. And as I've gotten later in my career and as I've worked with now dozens of businesses, I've seen more and more the power of an effective, really well thought out and measured and monitored sales process. And I've started to really learn more about that and study that more closely for better effectiveness. That's something I didn't do early enough in my career.
And you know, with inexpensive online CRM tools, you can, as you figure out certain milestones and have data, you can track how, the percentage chance of closing for that and really measure it a bit further. There's some great tools and really inexpensive now. But again, you have to know how to implement them. You have to know how to use them effectively, how to understand. Just buying a tool or subscribing to a service is not going to solve that problem. You have to really put in practice and know what you're working towards and know how to measure success and failure and results and then continually improve. You know, I really think that people are uncomfortable selling because they think of a pushy, manipulative salesperson, but that's not how it needs to be. I think early on I wanted sales to be very natural, very it just kind of came as I was talking to people, and if I just do a good job, the sales will just happen. And to some degree that's true. If you do well, you can create sort of organic sales and growth. But until you apply some discipline and really understand a process, you're not going to achieve scale. And so
yeah, I think I even wanted to avoid sales or not have to put an emphasis on sales, just sort of let it happen. And I've learned definitely that you're not going to build anything really big without having a really well-oiled sales machine.
So kind of so you like the more consultative approach, which is to try and understand what people need and all of that, but that's not enough. You need to have a structured approach that has some analysis going into it.
Absolutely, and of course the level of detail and what kind of structure you need will vary by business, right? Product company versus a service company, a very niche, high-end product versus something that's for the mass market. So
can you, kind of diving into that, can you give us an example of a company, not who they are, but what they did, and then what you looked at specific to the structured sales process?
Yeah, I think if I can think of a really clear, quick example, you know, there are several companies that have gotten to maybe the $500,000, million, and even above mark on that sort of shooting at the hip and networking and just talking to a lot of people, and a few things work. But the problem is, if you have success, sometimes success can actually be a detriment to you because you don't take the time to look at how you got that success.
Right.
And so I've seen some companies that did well by most measures, especially as a small business. They were profitable, they were growing, steady growth. But when they really buckled down and said, let's look at not only where we're succeeding, but how and why we're succeeding.
Right.
And then let's double down on those tactics and eliminate the things that aren't working. Sort of a numbers game, right? If you're having a 20% success ratio, then maybe that's good enough, but maybe you could be at 40% if you eliminate the half of the stuff that's really going to zero.
Oh, yeah.
And so analyzing and measuring, I think measurement and long-term trending is really important to know what's working and what's not. And of course, if you can eliminate the things that are not working, you only improve and increase the results of the things that are working.
Awesome. Kris, thank you for being here.
Absolutely, Pete. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
And so we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Thanks.